let's get started. So welcome. I'm Jeff Richardson, Director of Product Marketing here at Kochava, and excited to talk about contextual advertising with our partners at Dataseat, GumGum, and M&C Saatchi Performance. So we've got quite a lineup of experts here to talk about that topic today. Before we jump into the discussion, though, let's cover off on some quick announcements. So number one, we love your engagement. So please do connect with us in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from, what the weather's like where you're at, why you find contextual advertising interesting, whatever you want to throw in there. Also, you'll see there's a Q&A tab as well. So we love your questions. We had a number of questions during registration, but please submit them during the event live today as well, and we will try to get to as many of those questions as possible. Another point, the webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to watch this on demand at your leisure after today's event. There will be an email that will go out about 24 hours from now, a thank you follow-up email that will have the link to watch that webinar on demand. So keep an eye out for that. One more item, visit the Docs tab in the right side. We have a number of resources available there for you to further explore the topic that we're discussing today, and other resources provided both by Kochava and some of our partners on the webinar today. And last but not least, be sure to connect with us online across Facebook, X/Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc. We'd love to see you there so you can follow along with other content and future webinars. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers. So I'm going to bring them all up to the stage right now and have them do some introductions and tell a little bit about their companies, and then we'll get into the discussion. So welcome, Adrian, Mark, and Lane. You should be coming up here too. Awesome. So let's see, a little frog in my throat there. If we can just have each of you introduce yourself, and let's go in the order on the screen. So Lane, Mark, then Adrian, just say a quick hello and a little bit about your company.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everybody. I'm Lane Schechter, the Director of Product at GumGum. We specialize.
I don't hear you. Is that just my audio or is...
I can hear him.
Might just be you, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah, I can hear you, Lane.
Let me see here.
All right.
Let's see, Matt Goodrich on our public chat. If you can let me know if you're hearing me or if it's just me here that's not hearing people. Let's see. Can you try to talk, Mark and Adrian, real fast?
Hello, testing.
Yeah, testing.
Okay, so it looks like it must be me. So you know what? Keep going. Hopefully you can hear me.
Sounds good. All right.
I'll try and fix it out of here.
Lane Schechter, Director of Product at GumGum. We specialize in contextual advertising solutions that leverage advanced AI and machine learning to understand digital environments, content within digital environments in real time. Our focus is on delivering ads that are not just relevant, but resonate deeply with the audience based on the context they're currently engaging with. Looking forward to the conversation with you all today.
Yeah, great. I'll go next. I don't know if Jeff can hear us. There's always some curveball in these things, and I guess today ours is the fact that our moderator can't hear us. My name is Mark Menery. I'm Global Head of Sales for Dataseat. For anyone who's not familiar with Dataseat, we are a privacy-first mobile DSP. Essentially what that means is we were founded on the premise that device IDs would eventually go away. So mobile advertiser IDs like IDFA, Google Advertiser ID. So our founders built Dataseat 100% on contextual signals with no reliance on device IDs whatsoever. So really glad to be here with Saatchi Performance and GumGum and being hosted by Kochava.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adrian. I'm a Performance Media Director at M&C Saatchi Performance. We are a growth marketing agency, and we work with various app and other digital clients to help them grow their user base and achieve their business goals. So we have run contextual targeting in the past. We've worked with Dataseat and GumGum before, but we leverage kind of any strategy, platform, channel to hit the business goals and grow the user base for our clients.
Excellent. Jeff, can you hear us yet?
All right, I can hear you again now. It looked like when I shared my screen, I lost audio. So we'll see if we can still do a screen share or not for some of our slide material today, or if we'll have to go through this without screen share at all. But I couldn't hear all your introductions, so were you able to all get through that?
Yeah, we were good. You know who we are anyway, so it's all set.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. So, well, let's see. Sorry, I missed hearing all that, but hopefully when I share screen again here, we'll see if I have the same issue or not. But I did want to kick off before we dive into the main discussion with a poll just to gauge from the audience. So I'm going to open that poll now and actually put that onto the screen. If you go to the polls tab in your sidebar, you'll be able to vote in that. And we just like to gauge how many of you are already leveraging contextual advertising today or currently versus those that aren't or maybe aren't yet but are planning to. So awesome. So it looks like, wow, okay. A lot more than no or not yet but plan to are leveraging it. So that's awesome to see. And I guess just, thinking on this and the results you're seeing here, Adrian, from an agency perspective, just thinking about what your experience is right now with contextual advertising as a point of interest for the clients you work with. Is it something that you're seeing is shifting and becoming more important on folks' radar?
Yeah, I think that these results make a lot of sense and kind of mirror our experience. Like most of our clients are experimenting with contextual advertising. It's one of a number of different strategies that we're using. So definitely, people are already testing it out. It's already part of the strategy. But I think based off of the privacy changes and where the industry is headed, it's going to become more and more important. So we should see this strategy rise in prominence and, become kind of the core targeting strategy in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And Mark or Lane, any thoughts on seeing these results from the audience?
Yeah, it's encouraging. It's good to see. And I'm happy to report that 100% of our clients are testing contextual because we are contextual only. But no, this is really great to see, from the audience. And it's about, to Adrian's point, what I would expect as well. I think with privacy changes in market, with third-party cookies and deprecation of device IDs, companies are starting to test the waters and gravitate, over to contextual, which, for a company like Dataseat, is great to see.
Echo that sentiment all around.
Yeah, awesome. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the poll on screen, but folks, if you haven't had a chance to vote yet, feel free to jump in and do so. I'll keep that poll open in the background. So thanks for participating in that. I'm going to try and share screen here again to see if we can get through some of our slides that are kind of visual aids to our discussion. So let me see if I can do this without losing my audio. And 1 second here, let me just see if I can do this, and then I'll have you all talk for me and see if I can still hear you. Okay, I think we're coming up on screen here. And let's see, can I still hear you? Lane, can you say hello?
Hello.
Hey, all right, perfect. I can still hear you. We're good. We're on a roll. Okay, so awesome. So wanted to just quickly give a preview of the agenda for the discussion today, just from a very high level. We're going to just talk about, if you will, a TLDR on contextual advertising. So what is it, why it's important, how it works, talk about the current state of contextual advertising, and then cover some best practices and how to get started as part of the discussion. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into kind of what is contextual advertising. And I'd love to maybe have you kick us off here, Mark, especially if we think about like a comparison of contextual versus behavioral, which I think is a helpful, side by side to help folks understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, to give kind of a high level, very high level of contextual. So contextual is looking at targeting based on the content of the site or the app in mobile, right? For example, or the context of what the user is doing sort of in the moment, right? And so I think of that as, you might be on a gardening site or a gardening app and see, advertisements for Home Depot or something along those lines. Whereas behavioral, which has been around for quite some time now, is looking more at the user or the IDFA, the Google Advertiser ID, the individual device, right? And so it's saying on the mobile front anyway, we know what apps you have downloaded on your phone. We know what purchases you're making within those apps, time spent within those apps, et cetera, right? And creating device graphs so that, for example, if it's someone that has quite a few dating apps on their phone and someone's running a campaign for a dating app, they're probably going to target that individual user with a premium bid, right? Whereas contextual, like we said before, is more of the content of the site or the app. And one example that we typically use is it's the reason why BMW has advertised on Financial Times, right? It just makes sense. It's fitting. So I would say that that's a pretty good, comparison of the two. And, Adrian and Lane, definitely feel free to jump in and add to that.
Yeah, any thoughts on that, Adrian?
Yeah, you summed it up well. It's where people are viewing the content in the moment versus their past behavior.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking too about the why. I know contextual advertising isn't new, right? It's kind of maybe one of the older forms of contextual advertising as I think about, like, someone buying an ad in a magazine that is, basically intended for the exact demographic or audience that they have a product for. But obviously there's been some shifts in the advertising, especially digital advertising landscape as of late. And so if you think about why it's important, I'd love to have Adrian, you go through just some of the shifts, if you will, from a privacy and tracking perspective across the last 6 years. And you gave us this awesome slide with this timeline. So I'll let you take it away here.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes in the landscape, in particular around privacy and user tracking, all the way back to 2018 when we had legislation come into play, GDPR in Europe, which does affect the US as well as and CCPA in California. So putting limits on how we track users, getting consent for tracking with cookies, that has expanded into, on the mobile side, Apple introducing ATT and scan. So making the device ID tracking opt-in rather than readily available. Google on their side has been talking about cookie deprecation for quite a while, even back to 2020. They've delayed that a few times and actually delayed it again. Cookie deprecation was supposed to happen by the end of this year, but they pushed it back to 2025. So nonetheless, we still want to be prepared and kind of know what's coming and be ready for that. So definitely makes sense to still be thinking about it and planning for it. And then there's, of course, more legislation happening in the US. More users or just the general public are becoming aware of this, and it's becoming more and more important. So it's important that we're adapting and we're adjusting our frameworks and our strategies to be compliant with these new privacy laws and this new privacy first landscape. Yeah,
and I know you mentioned, I think it's within the last fresh 24 hours, the news about the delay of the cookieless feature on Chrome. But if you look at kind of this chart that you provided here with some of these stats across currently really 2024 through end of 2025, can you walk us through some of what we're seeing here?
Yeah, so this sets the stage of where we're at now in terms of unique identifiers. So currently about 33% of identifiers are being blocked. That's happening across iOS, as well as Safari and Firefox, which don't have cookies already. And then 1% of Chrome. So this is kind of Google testing out cookieless tracking on Chrome. So still 67% are active. That's across Android and then the rest of Chrome and other browsers. But that is going to shrink over this year and next. So when Chrome blocks cookies, that's going to make a big impact. It's going to go down to 67% blocked. And then we do anticipate them doing something similar across Android devices. So limiting that device ID like iOS has done, which should happen sometime in 2025. Maybe they'll push it back to 2026, who knows? But that will block kind of the majority of identifiers. So there are some solutions in the works. We already have Scan, there's Google Privacy Sandbox, but it just makes these advertising strategies that don't rely on unique identifiers even more important, contextual advertising being one of them.
Yeah. Well, if we think about, I know we talked about what it is, but diving a little bit more into how it actually works and knowing that we can't use, in the future, mobile ad IDs, cookies for targeting at a user level based on their behavior, if you will. Can you, Mark, kind of kick us off talking about how contextual advertising works, and then Lane and Adrian, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, definitely. So again, we're looking at, a lot of different signals, in order to target and to optimize, our campaigns on our side. So, looking at the publisher apps, different contents and categories, language, geos, all of these different factors. So we're essentially weighing these signals, and I have a slide on this in a little bit that we can review. That's essentially telling us, what we should be bidding on, et cetera. In this slide, I like to kick this off by basically saying that, yeah, the days of run of network are over, right? So I was at JumpTap back in 2009 to 2013. We were one of the first mobile ad networks. We developed eventually a DSP, and it was contextual, right? But it has evolved so much over the past 14, 15 years as to what we're doing, today. So Dataseat in particular, and just talking about the technology behind this a little bit, is developed proprietary technology in order to hit the ground running, right? So that we're not casting this really wide net of run of network, and we're starting off, with the ability to run one of these campaigns with success. So we've partnered with Data AI and a few other businesses that helps us, curate these contextual signals, so that in our system we can input things like, budget, type of campaign, different campaign details, and then the output is, a little bit of this cross app affinity scoring, which is, you should be running on these 100 apps or these 500 apps or these 10,000 apps, whatever that might be. And what contextual tells us is, well, you're running an ad for a dating app, or you're running an ad for a messaging app, so that should run on dating or messaging apps. And that's certainly true in some cases, don't get me wrong. But with this cross-app affinity scoring and us understanding different audiences that we can target, what we're looking at is what subcategories or what categories of apps that you wouldn't think would be related to the campaign at all have a high score and actually would work really well. So this is what Dataseat's doing on our end to say, you're running a campaign for a messaging app, but this utility app has a really high cross-app affinity score. We're going to test on this and several others, and so on and so forth. So this is the smart technology that we have to start moving towards on the contextual side, so that we're not wasting budget or taking 6-7 weeks to get something or different KPIs in line, if that makes sense.
No, that helps. And I guess Lane, from a GumGum side, thinking about contextual advertising and how it works for your end, can you speak to some of the key signals that you look at?
Yeah, absolutely there. And thanks for setting that up, Mark. And, I think similarly over at GumGum, specifically with our advanced contextual solution, Verity, what we're doing is producing those signals, some of those signals that Mark mentioned there, where we're looking at open web digital content, be it web pages, imagery, text, audio, video, and digesting that into different textual elements and imagery elements, to apply machine learning techniques, computer vision, and natural language processing to essentially define the aboutness, the content aboutness, produce labels, whether it's standard taxonomies, custom taxonomies, moving into more emotive and like sentiment based and tonalities, to really understand what each of these environments is about, to produce signals for it that can then be used for targeting or avoidance, and making sure that the messaging of the creative or the advertiser is really resonating with that particular environment. But also, as Mark mentioned there, to really tease out maybe the not so obvious thing. So while the obvious alignment is sort of traditionally, I think, how we've thought of contextual, the sporting goods brand wants to be on the sport content, or his mention there. Mark's mentioned previously of BMW wanting to advertise across the Financial Times because they just believe that intrinsically that their audience would be there, or potentially through looking at historical data that their audience would be there. But it's really to find that those other environments, what are they about, where your audience is also converting, so that you can optimize and extend sort of your reach, leveraging a privacy first mechanism that also tends to enhance relevancy with your messaging, because you're meeting your consumer in an environment that they're already interested in and engaging in with a specific type of content, and they've made that intention clear.
And there was actually a question that came in from one of our registrants, and Adrian, I'm looking to specifically you on this one, but it asks specifically around the beauty industry, how contextual marketing strategies could be tailored to personalize customer experiences and increase product engagement. So anecdotally, for that specific example, in the light of how it works, can you speak to kind of what your recommendations would be in a beauty specific context?
Yeah, I think there are so many ways that you can leverage contextual advertising for beauty. I think here it would be important to align the creative and the context or where you're showing the ads. So thinking about your audience, who you want to use your product, the different segments within that, and then what is their unique need or where are they online. So maybe you have a beauty product that you're tailoring towards like an older demographic. You can feature that demographic in the ads, speaking to their needs, showing people that look like them, and then run it on like AARP or like sites where these older people are, visiting often. Another example would be like maybe you have certain ingredients in your skincare that are different or safe for pregnant people. Like when women are pregnant, there's certain ingredients they're not supposed to use. So maybe you want to highlight that and run it across like pregnancy related apps or sites, like trying to marry up the audience where they are and their needs and how that relates back to your product.
Yeah, just to echo that, I love that, matching creative, not just with the app or the site, but the placement within the app or the site, right? Because you can have a lot of different content or context depending on where you actually are. I think that's super important for sure.
Yeah. That's a helpful context, I think. Well, I want to put up another poll here from for the audience to engage with here. I'm going to open it in the background. It's available again in the polls tab. It's asking, what do you see as the biggest challenge for contextual advertising? So I think this is something we'll unpack a little bit in this next section as we talk about the current state of contextual advertising and some of the evolution, if you will, of capability to address some of those specific challenges. So I'm going to promote this poll to screen here real fast, just so we can see as results come in here what folks are highlighting. So we have everything from targeting accuracy, scale, and efficiency, being able to really hit your performance KPIs, limitations with partners. How many partners are there that you can go to and run contextual targeting and contextual advertising campaigns. So we've got there's a good mix here, but the winner at the moment is the hitting performance KPIs. So that might change because targeting accuracy is climbing up there. But if those are the top two, are there any thoughts that any of you have on what you're seeing here in terms of some of the challenges that you've seen in the field working with a client or on a specific endeavor or campaign?
Yeah, I think targeting accuracy is a good one. There can be some wastage when you're doing contextual targeting because on one app or site, there might be so many different types of people visiting that. I think for that one, it's really about taking a test and learn approach, starting across a variety of different apps or keywords, however you're approaching it, and just seeing what's working the best and refining from there. I think it takes a lot of curation and refinement to really get it going and get it working, which also feeds into hitting the performance KPIs. But yeah, that is something to keep in mind and something that you do want to test and learn through.
Yeah, and I think just to add on that, I think Adrian teed that up really nicely there. It's having transparency into the some contextual reporting, I think, in terms of what were the environments that you were actually serving your ads in, were they accurate? And then you can make more informed decisions to understand where the optimization opportunity exists to ensure that you are hitting those performance KPIs. I think in some other tactics, there's a little bit more transparency potentially in terms of where the ads actually are serving. And I think that's an area that we can continue to kind of do better in the contextual front, is providing that transparency so that you can know if the targeting that you're applying is actually accurate. And if so, in which environments, which ones are most performant and are actually driving performance, so you can optimize towards those and away from the ones that aren't working for you.
Yeah, and just to add on that, and both are great points. transparency is key, right? And I think that with transparency comes brand safety and vice versa, right? And so I think one of the benefits of being one of the things that Dataseat sort of had to do, right, is become a transparent mobile DSP, right? And we did that because we wanted to show the privacy first. We wanted to prove out the brand safety. And so back to the curation of these publisher whitelists, the good news is that from a app perspective, or a placement perspective within that app, you know where you're running. So I agree with Adrian very much. Sometimes it can be a very wide audience within that app, but the benefit is that it is fully transparent, or it is with some companies like Dataseat and Verve Group, for example. It's transparent. It's also brand safe. You have the exact list of where you're running, which I know a lot of advertisers, including our agency and brand partners, take very seriously. The hitting performance KPIs piece is definitely one that comes up often. People look at contextual. I don't want to say contextual as a bad rap, but people do look at contextual as more of this archaic way of targeting and optimizing, and it is true in a way, right? It's older than behavioral for sure, but at the same time, it's very, very effective. And we can talk about this maybe more later, Jeff. But in some cases, it can be a little bit more time consuming, or it can take more of a crawl, walk, run approach, as opposed to behavioral, where you do hit the ground running a little bit quicker. So sometimes patience comes in, but you want to work with a trusted partner to sort of help you find that balance.
Yeah, those are great. And I think, are there any of these challenges that ring true if we think about contextual targeting and advertising on web versus mobile versus what's starting to be available on CTV? Any commentary, and Lane, looking to you, knowing that GumGum does both web and CTV, right? Anything around CTV specifically that's such a burgeoning channel that's a challenge with contextual?
Yeah, no, great tip there. I think the biggest challenge that we're seeing right now is in the CTV space. That's worth calling out because it is such an emerging and growing avenue. Is really the scale of available signals within pre-bid specifically. In order for true, deep, advanced contextual signals to be produced, you need to be able to access content to actually provide those signals about what that content's about. And in the CTV space and video space, particularly CTV, you need a unique identifier to be able to actually access and look at that content. And right now, those unique identifiers are a bit limited in the pre-bid space. But going direct or through private marketplace deals and PMPs, there does seem to be a good volume there in terms of CTV scale, and we are able to access video data to actually perform our contextual analysis on and provide those signals for targeting opportunities there, and are seeing some great success. But the scale issue, which wasn't really ranking very highly on the poll here, it is a concern right now in CTV. Going to keep our eyes on that as hopefully the demand continues to grow. The supply will also meet it, and we'll be able to offer and provide the contextual at scale in a pre-bid environment as well.
Yeah. I'd love to, go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, just one more thing to quickly throw in there, and I don't want to, I know that we're sort of moving on, but the measurement piece I saw is a concern up there too. And I think it's great to see, companies like Kochava embracing, Scan and Privacy Sandbox and all of these other things, because it's more of a deterministic form of measurement. So I just wanted to measure that there is that sort of more deterministic approach coming with these privacy first attribution frameworks from the operating systems. And again, it's great to see, Kochava sort of on top of that and looking forward, which is great.
Yeah, and actually, in the Docs tab, there's a link out to our Scan guide for marketers. So if Scan on iOS, at least specifically, is a very important framework for measurement if you're doing any sort of contextual or other advertising. But obviously, things will become more privacy first in the targeting approach as changes on iOS move forward. So check that out if you want to know more about Scan specifically. Before we jump on to talking about current state, I thought this is a great question that came in from Vansh Gupta. It says, we're focused on digital advertising, but print and traditional advertising is seen to be as effective as well and growing in interest. How do we contextualize advertising in more traditional medium? So any thoughts on this? And, Adrian, from an agency side, especially looking to you potentially for any thoughts you have here.
For sure. We've talked about this before. Contextual advertising is kind of born out of these traditional mediums, is kind of baked into what they are. You have like print, which will have, newspapers or magazines with different themes. Like that is in itself contextual. So running in like The Economist or something, that's going to be really finance heavy or reach kind of a wealthier audience versus ESPN magazine, which is going to be more sports focused, more male skewing. So I think it's quite intuitive for the traditional mediums. Print's a good example. But yeah, would love to hear Mark and Lane's perspective on this as well.
Yeah, I've always been a performance guy at heart. So my feedback is always, test everything, right? So whether it's print or digital CTV, it doesn't matter, right? It's all about testing different channels and figuring out what works. And to your point, on the contextual side, it's not easy to figure out exactly where you should be or what placements you should be in. But it's a little bit more straightforward, I feel like. And then in addition to that, depending on the channels, like looking at different, sites, apps, placements, whatever, maybe print or otherwise, that are related to what you're advertising, but maybe not that direct or exact category is what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. Well, the time is flying by here, so I'm gonna have us jump into kind of the current state of contextual advertising, and especially in light of some of the challenges that we just discussed. But looking at the evolution of how contextual has changed, I would love to, Lane, have you walk through this brief history of contextual advertising you provided, which I think will be really helpful backdrop.
Sure, absolutely. So won't touch too much on the first pieces, but more so where we're at today and where we're heading. But because we've kind of glossed over those already. But as it's been mentioned, contextual is not new, but that doesn't mean that it's the same contextual that was applied in yesterday. Are not your grandparents' contextual, as we've said in the past. But the first types of it were really, aligning your messaging or buying within a publication type, whether this was in print or on radio or, on once we moved into digital environments as well, just buying a specific publication because you believe that your audience aligned with that publication. Then, and we got a little bit more nuanced and we started being able to target specific keywords, specific sites, using keywords or key phrases. And that's kind of when contextual, some of the early contextual tools were developed. We're talking a little over a decade now when those came to market there. And it was more of this keyword based approach. Today, I think we're really sitting in much more of a semantic understanding. We'll, for the sake of the conversation, call this contextual 3.0. And it's really, leveraging AI models and looking at that language and other inputs, imagery as well, to get a better understanding of semantically of putting logic behind the language as well. What does this mean? How do I understand this page like a human would, but having a machine do it so that we could actually do this at scale and move beyond just vertical based targeting or move beyond publication based targeting. And this is really, I think, in setting us up for this move towards more of a, we'll call it a mindset driven approach of being able to really understand the mindset of the consumer in a privacy forward way by ingesting and understanding as much as we can about the environment, not just from a standard taxonomy or keyword basis, but moving beyond that, understanding the tonality, the emotion, the mood of the content, where in their journey, in terms of, within the publication, is this an uplifting sort of article? Is this the tonality of it? And then also looking at measuring that with things like attention, some of these newer metrics that are coming to play here as well, to understand where's the consumer spending the most attention, where's the creative garnering the most attention, is that creative compelling? How do we then potentially even use those contextual signals and understand creatives, what's happening within the creative, match that with the contextual environment that the creative is being served, what's the attention time that's being garnered there by the audience, and then optimize based on sort of the synergy between the three of those to understand the messaging, the environment, and which one, where it's garnering the most effectiveness, and optimizing based on that. None of this is using personal identifiable information. All of this is just understanding what's in the creative, what's the context, what's understanding that much like a human would, and then being able to have a feedback loop that measures the effectiveness of that match, and then optimize off of that.
And is that, I know that you have the term at GumGum contextual intelligence, and is that really the summation of what that means for you?
Yeah. It's really just trying to consistently uncover more and more signals that we can use in ingest to produce labels for and understand the relationship between compelling creative, understanding an environment, and measurement, and keeping those three things constantly in conversation with one another to understand where that best performance and best outcome is going to be reached is really through understanding what's in the creative, what's in the environment, and where is it performing, and making sure that those signals are readily available and being reported on and transparent, and believing that kind of moves us into this reach the consumer in the right place with the right ad at the right time.
Yeah, I love this slide too.
I'll go back real fast for you, Mark.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to comment on it because at the end of it, I think of it as, from a contextual perspective, I'm in a very different mood depending on, what app I might be using, right? Like I might be in a different mindset if I'm playing solitaire than if I'm, on the Home Depot app, right? It's a entirely different mindset. So to Lane's point, it's very much a mixture of, it could be a mixture of contextual signals like time of day or day of week mixed with the placement and then the app and the content and all of these other things. I mean, if I see an app for buying a pair of sneakers, versus buying a coffee, like it's like, when do you serve me that ad at what point without knowing, my behavioral traits, right? And so these are the things that I think that we're going to start to get better at and smarter at. So I wanted to compliment especially the 4.0 piece of this, because this is where my mindset is, no pun intended, as things progress.
It's very contextual. Let's put it that way. Well, and so looking at Dataseat now and some of the signals that we talked about that help Dataseat drive performance, can you unpack, especially those top four that are highlighted, but how you kind of rank the importance of those different signals and variables?
Yeah, so just to explain the slide briefly, or I should say the chart briefly, before I dive into it. So this is a mixture of contextual signals that the Dataseat sees, bids on, et cetera. Not all of them, but we'll call it most of them. The left side of the y-axis here is the contextual signal. The x-axis is level of importance. So we still find that in most cases, performance is mainly driven from that content, right? The publisher app or the publisher site or whatever it might be. So where we're serving that ad. But what we also see is that, different apps or sites will perform very differently when they're in different exchanges, right? So you may have the same app that runs in 3 different exchanges and the performance is very different, right? And then differs by country or by state or whatever it might be. And then you have individual placements within those apps or those sites that also perform very differently. So those 4 we've seen as being the most important contextual signals that we're optimizing off of. But we don't want to forget about the other ones below either, right? Like I look at like the dating app example, and I know I bring it up often, but essentially, you're probably not going to see a lot of success running a lot of ads for a dating app at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning versus Thursday evening or Friday, right? Something like that, right? Whereas a utility app, you might be better off running during a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon or something along those lines. So all of these things combined is really where we're generating, the appropriate targeting and performance. And Dataseat in particular has been doing this for quite some time. And in models and algorithms and all these things take a lot of time and a lot of data to sort of build up this intelligence. The other piece of this too is that, the contextual frameworks that we talked about that are being released, so SCAN's been around for quite some time, only really adheres to contextual signals, right? Or those are the only signals that are being passed back and can be, optimized off of. So when working with a scan or something along those lines, you want to partner with an ad network or a DSP that knows what they're doing from a contextual perspective. So yeah, this is the majority of the signals that we're looking at. There are more, but this is certainly the main ones that we see as being the most important.
No, this is great. Well, I want to jump into, we've got some great questions that have popped in here. I want to kind of get to best practices and getting started. Obviously, a lot of folks are already practicing contextual advertising. So for them, it might be more some new best practices and expert tips for that segment of the audience watching. But specifically, I'd like to take this question here. I'm going to stop sharing so I can bring this up on screen. 1 second here. There's a great question from Andrew. How should we think about contextual advertising in social? So social media publishers like Meta, Reddit. What about visual platforms like YouTube and TikTok? Adrian, is there some insight you can provide from the best practices or advice standpoint on that?
Definitely. In order for contextual targeting to really be possible, you do have to know the content or the themes of the site or the page that you're bidding on. So with platforms like Meta, it's all user-generated content. You're in like a feed where you're scrolling through. People are posting different things. There's not really like content categories, or there's no way to say I want to be right after a post about dogs or anything like that. So contextual advertising is not really well suited for Meta. But something like YouTube is very relevant because you can be across specific channels that have themes, like a car-based channel, and that can align really well contextually. Also, you can, Google allows you to target based off those contextual signals as well. So it really depends on the social media platform and kind of what data you're able to get back from them. Reddit is another one where contextual fits really well because you can target certain subreddits that have very specific themes, and that's a great tactic to reach like a very passionate audience on Reddit. But outside of these social media platforms, like there's such a vast internet out there. Like people are obviously using Meta and Reddit, but they're also browsing a million different other websites and apps. So I would say like don't just focus on those. Think about how you can leverage the rest of the internet as well.
Yeah, and I want to put this one up from Nicole as well. Interesting, it's talking about the profitable growth concerns for e-com, especially so e-commerce, and what your take would be on contextual advertising versus like high intent placements in search. So which is very, very low in the funnel. Any thoughts on that? And that could be Adrian, Mark, Elaine, if you want to chime in on that at all.
Yeah, I mean, search is a great channel because it is so high intent. People are raising their hands saying they're looking for your product and service. I think contextual advertising is maybe a little bit higher funnel than that because you're kind of making assumptions, or you're saying because they're on this site, they are likely to be interested in my product. So I don't think that you can really compare it to search. They're kind of very different channels, very different use cases, but they work hand in hand. Like if you are leveraging contextual advertising, you're generating that interest, that consideration, and then they're probably going to go to search to find your product if they're not clicking on the ad directly.
Yeah, the two complement each other pretty well. Contextual, you're obviously taking a broader, less intent focused or adventure on that one for sure. And so it is a little bit more about testing there, whereas search is, I don't want to say it's more guaranteed, but it sort of is, right? The intent is there. But yeah, totally echo what Adrian said.
Yeah, and one of the signals that we're looking at with Verity too, and continuing to test in, is sort of trying to bridge that gap even more between they're already complementary, the contextual aspect and search, but understanding the content type to help in bridging that gap of intention too. And what I mean by that is identifying differences from a contextual standpoint between editorial content versus a product's listing page or a search results or a listings page to begin with, breaking news, and just kind of taking into account that there is some intent already being implied there based on the type of content that the consumer is engaging with inherently there. If you're looking at a product details page, higher likelihood that there is probably some purchase intent behind that, or some intrigue in potential purchase intent, versus potentially in some editorial environments or breaking news or a recipe site, for example. The mindset that the consumer's in when they're looking at a recipe could be very different than if they're looking at a product listing page for a blender versus intent to buy a blender on a recipe page. That's just anecdotal there, but those are other things that we're looking at to try to bridge that gap between not just understanding the context from an aboutness perspective, but also what type of content is this that we're classifying in that manner, so that we can try to get closer to that high intent placement as well.
I love the mindset factor. That's huge. I was just thinking about both my wife and I, when we use recipe blogs, it's just so funny sometimes, because sometimes they just blow up with ads so much that it's hard to get the page to scroll, and you're like, I just want to get to the recipe, or I just want to get to the next steps, right? You're not really looking to buy the blender at that moment. You're already in the middle of cooking, right?
Exactly. Those are the important things to call out, because even if the relevancy is there, that's still not the optimal placement for you, most likely.
Yeah. Well, this other question, also from Nicole, fits perfectly into just the discussion of some best practices and things to have in mind as you're getting started. So I would love, maybe we can kick off with you, Adrian, and then hit Mark and Lane. What are some best practices and tips that you would share generally, but also specifically to Nicole's question here, for those looking to get started and scale?
Sure. So I would say first to think about your audience, who you're trying to reach, and what is a good user experience for them. So we want to be able to provide value to the users so that they will respond well to the ads and engage with them. So that's the research part that you really want to do before you start testing. Who's your audience? What are their media habits? What sites or apps are they frequenting? And then when you're reaching them on those sites and apps, how can you provide the best possible ad experience? Trying to align the content of your ads with the context that they're shown in can work really well. Like if you are running across a lot of gaming inventory, maybe a playable ad would resonate well. So trying to be as thoughtful from the beginning and provide a great user experience for your customers.
That's really great. Mark?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great one. I would say, trust your partners. Well, work with a trusted partner and then trust their recommendations, right? And I'm going to specifically talk about budget, because contextual can, in most cases, take a little bit longer to get to a comfortable place in terms of KPIs than behavioral can, right? You think about behavioral and it makes sense. You're targeting an individual user who just, for example, has multiple casino apps on their phone and spends a lot of money within casino apps. So what are you going to do if you're a behavioral ad network or DSP? You're going to bid even a $200 CPM for that individual user. Contextual doesn't know the user, right? But we have other signals that we're combining where we're going to find that user or similar users like that, right? Just different ways and using different signals to combine that. So it may take a little bit longer. So contextual is going to take more of a crawl, walk, run approach. And we're going to try to crawl and walk and run as fast as we possibly can, but it does take some time, right? And I can't even tell you the amount of examples, not just at Dataseat, but throughout my career, where I had two very similar, if not almost identical apps within the same category, same subcategory, et cetera. And one tested with, I'm just throwing numbers out there, $10,000 versus $30,000, and the $30,000 got it to work out on week 3 or week 4, right? And that lower budget amount just didn't get there because they didn't put enough volume into it. So you have to be able to test the waters and figure out, you just figure out what's going to work. And your trusted partner is going to get you there as fast as possible. There's no person in our industry on the planet who just wants to blow through a test budget and then never work with you again. These test budgets are made specifically for a reason. And just one last thing I'll say about that is a good contextual partner has internal technology or systems or models or whatever you want to call it, where they're making very specific budget recommendations based on a lot of different factors within your campaign. Like we have one for Scan, for example, to try to overcome privacy thresholds, right? To say, all right, you're this type of app and this type of, et cetera. You have to spend this amount per day for us to get max visibility in order to try to get this to work. So I would say a little bit of patience, trust your partner, and test budget is key. You don't have to blow the doors open, but the recommendations you should accept.
That's great, Lane. Especially too, I know about like thinking about how you're assessing the performance in an apples to apples context for contextual versus other forms is something we chatted about. But love your tips.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Adrian and Mark both touched on a lot of really important best practices there. So everything they said rings true from our perspective as well. And just to really tease out a couple more there, it's really one, I think understanding the depth of the signals being considered by whatever contextual provider or vendor that you're working with there. Transparency is so critical, not just in our industry, but in general, is an important important foundational element to build that trust, is having that transparency into what is being considered when you're producing these labels that are then going to be used for targeting or avoidance. And then piggybacking off of that, it's really during this testing phase and even ongoing is taking the time to actually isolate your contextual strategy from some of the other tactics that you might be employing, so that you can actually see which contexts are working for you and which ones aren't. I think a lot of times we do see that we will layer contextual strategies onto other tactics that are also at play here, and that won't allow for the full I think opportunity to see which contexts are working for you. And we're going to see that continue to change campaign over campaign. It could even change week over week, which context is your messaging really hitting and performing for you on. And as long as you're getting that reporting back from whichever partner that you're working with, and there's a high level of trust already established, and these are the signals that they're analyzing, that's aligned with our expectation of what should be analyzed or what we're expecting to be analyzed. We believe in the accuracy of this this offering, and we're getting good indication of which environments, what's the context of those environments that are actually performing for us, and then being able to optimize off of those. And if you're actually willing to isolate the contextual ad buy there, that tactic, it's going to give you a lot more transparency into what's working and what's not working. But like Mark said, it's a crawl, walk, run there too. But I think can definitely help in extending reach and refining to make sure that you're using another signal that can help you optimize and ultimately hit those campaign objectives.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that we're getting close to the end here, and I recalled that we had gone through and had that poll, and really this tied for second place in terms of some of the biggest challenges that folks have seen for contextual advertising was measurement. So it tied with targeting accuracy, whereas the hitting performance KPIs was the top complaint, if you will. So I wanted to touch briefly on, we had hit on the notion of Scan as well as Privacy Sandbox. There's also solutions like marketing mix modeling that are not the traditional kind of point in time tests or quarterly or biannual MMM assessments, but more of a dynamic real time MMM tool that are now available on the market. Kochava has one that can allow you to measure things in a privacy durable, that's a new term I'm seeing, form of measurement that doesn't rely on, device signals, cookies, mobile ad IDs, any of those things that are going away and have a definite shelf life on them. And then even data clean rooms are helpful, not just from a measurement side, but also even from a targeting side when you're working with two distinct parties, potentially in a private marketplace or direct deal scenario. So if you're looking to use contextual advertising and you're having troubles with measurement, certainly talk with your partner, but reach out to Kochava as well, and we'll be happy to help kind of steer you in the right direction and get you set up with measurement that allows you to measure the performance KPIs so that you can actually ensure you're hitting them. Because without the measurement, obviously, you don't know how you're doing. There are a couple final questions that I am hoping we can peel off here. One that I wanted to bring up that came in during registration actually was this notion of the consent, if you will. If we're talking a lot about privacy, and so what are thoughts that any of you have around the consent required for a contextual advertising scenario? Obviously, we're not targeting the user based on their past behavior, so it's way less intrusive, if you will. It's more just, hey, what are you looking at, right? What's in front of you right now and your intent in the context of that. So any thoughts that either one of you have on that question?
Yeah, for me, consent plays more of a part in the behavioral piece, right? If you're getting personal, right, and you're targeting a user with an eye out based on their past behavior, right? So something that they've bought or something that they've specifically done online. I think in those cases it makes sense, right? On the contextual side, because it's based more on the content and not the individual user, I don't think consent makes a whole lot of sense personally. I mean, you don't get consent, or you don't have to give consent when you drive past a billboard, right? Like down on the highway. So I just look at it as when you're doing contextual advertising, it's unnecessary. I think on the behavioral side, obviously you can make the argument that you're targeting an individual, their behavior, things that they've purchased, et cetera, makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, I'll add, it's not as necessary to show the ad contextually because that's kind of how our whole system of a free internet is built. It's supported on being able to show ads on various websites. Where it would come into play is tracking that user's actions after they see the ad. So if they're going to your website and then converting, that's where you have to have that consent in order to attribute those conversions on a user level basis.
Yeah. And where the frameworks, the likes of Scan and Sandbox for Chrome, Sandbox for Android, right, come in handy as they can still provide the measurement, but it's on device, it's anonymized, it's privacy first. So there's no exchange of those identifiers in order to facilitate connecting the dots on a user to user basis. It's aggregate. Well, we are close to the finish line and wrapping up right now. So I just want to say thank you, Mark, Adrian, Lane, for joining for this discussion. This was great. So much learned. An email will go out tomorrow with the recording. And if you do want to engage with any of those docs in the tab as resources from